Okay, so I want to discuss some issues I find with adults watching kid cartoons. Okay, there's been this sort of explosion of adults watching kid cartoons, and I mean specifically kid cartoons or at least kiddish cartoons, right? I'm not, of course, I'm not just talking about animation, there's more adult or mature animation. I'm talking about kid cartoons and kiddish cartoons. Okay? And basically, one issue I believe that's with adults watching kid cartoons is how I feel like sort of it's taking away from kid catered content. Okay? So basically, if you like there's this sort of media which maybe I'll just call it like adult friendly, adult kid media, right? Let's just call it that. You know, those movies, sometimes animated movies that's catered to children, but it's also adult tolerable or adult friendly, right? Which was this sort of genre of media created more for practical reasons, right? Uh, Typically, kids can't go to the movies by themselves, so the parents going to have to take them and they're going to have to sit through these movies. So we've created this formula of sorts that that adult kid movie, right? So I don't think there's something necessarily wrong with that type of media, but then there's also just sort of kid geared media, kid directed media, okay? And but that is becoming less and less because adults are watching these kid cartoons. So I think two general things happen, okay? Either there's these kid shows are created, right? And then these creators get wind that it has this growing adult fan base, so they'll sort of convert it into that adult kid sort of media, right? They'll change the formula, okay? So their kids are sort of losing media that's just for them, exclusively for kids, catered to them, right? Which has these other sort of issues with that. But then another thing that happens is because this sort of adult kid friendly content is becoming so friendly popular, these creators are just creating it from the start, which again is, you know, reducing this kid only sort of content. Okay? So, right? And then it would just be nice if there's just media that's because this media is geared for different people, right? Not just there's the it would just be nice if kids had things just for them, but then we're seeing a reduction of that. Okay, but then there's the other sort of aspects of that where it's like when it becomes this more adult kid media, there's going to be things that are either inappropriate for that child, or like if it's not done very well, or kids have different capacities, different perceptions, and that's what kid shows kind of are. They're sort of meeting those capacities and perceptions, or even that level of knowledge expected for a child, right? Sometimes we don't dump all of this knowledge of the world into a child, but some things are going over kids' heads, let's say, because they're trying to also sort of pander or meet the desires of these adults that are watching these shows. Okay? So, right? And then sometimes it can get into a little more, I guess, toxic territory where sometimes it leans like you'll see very mature elements in these shows that are supposed to be catered to children because they're almost over catering to these adults. Okay? So I feel like that's kind of one issue there. Another issue I feel is that this is sort of reinforcing arrested development. Okay, um, these there's kid shows that are being watched by adults, and these more adult kid shows that are being watched by adults. And then there's even maybe, I don't know if I should put them in this adult kid category, but maybe I'll just put them in the kiddish category because it's almost not. There's almost these cartoons that are kind of more catered to adults, but they're still kiddish. Something kind of like maybe not quite Adventure Time, but what's that other show called? Um, I think it stars a bird and a raccoon TV show. Regular shows like around there. Okay, it's not just like adult. I mean, a lot of these cartoons, even for adults, have these sort of kiddish elements, so it's kind of hard to say. But like South Park has these kiddish vibes, even though it's sort of supposed to be exclusively geared and directed towards adults. You know what I'm saying? But more with these adult kid shows and just these kid shows, it's just reinforcing this sort of arrested development where, you know, they it's geared towards children. So it's like these different certain themes and activities are sort of not being explored and that type of thing. I feel like our society is already almost encouraging arrested development in us, and these shows, which a lot of toxic issues spin from that, and these shows are reinforcing um, arrested development. Okay, it's sort of normalizing it. It's reinforcing it. There's not a lot of adult issues being explored, adult challenges being explored, or it just sort of. Sometimes there is. It's more of. It's capacity is more expansive than these shows are sort of giving us credit for. Where I feel like it can reduce our capacity and then sort of lock us into that more limited capacity, which is more naturally biological for children, right? Biologically, children just have this more sort of dimmer perception, this more limited capacity and perception, navigation ability, and that type of thing. Watching these kid shows and these adult kid shows like that, and even some of these kiddish shows, are sort of causing this sort of regression, let's say, and sort of locking us into it. Especially when there's this fervor and like popularity and hype around it, right? This hyper normalization. Okay, so I feel like that's another issue. There's so many issues for people with arrested development just navigate differently, okay, which is causing a lot of issues. So that's sort of the second issue I feel like with adults watching kid cartoons. Another issue I feel is this sort of, I'm not sure what you call it, almost this crossover. What I mean is there will be, there's, so you can find a lot of content around, fandom sort of content around these shows, but sometimes it's very adult or mature geared or expressed. But these kids are also fans of the show, and they're Googling or looking on social media, Googling, finding things, and they're watching these videos, which is, I feel like that's a lot of a parenting issue, but still it's happening where they'll watch these videos and it's very adult or mature. And that's sort of an issue with adults watching your cartoons. Then there's even this aspects of like eroticizing. Sometimes there'll be erotic fan art, erotic fan fiction. And again, kids are searching. They just want to read fan fiction, look at pictures. they're running into these sort of very erotic, mature content because adults are watching these kid shows. Okay, so uh, like I don't think there's all necessarily has to be this total split from adults and kids, right? If your kids are in soccer and you know you can have a pickup game with a kid and you're playing basketball together or that type of thing. Boy Scouts, it's adults and kids together, whatever. Kayaking with your kid, okay? But there are some sort of arenas and spaces where this is sort of muddying that. It's almost like it has this vibe of adults going to play in a kid's playground vibes. That's kind of what's happening, and it's kind of like it's not like the general park. It's like the playground that's specifically for children, and you don't have kids, and there's kids playing there, and you come with your adult friends and you're playing there too. It's kind of like there's nothing wrong with going to a playground, but there's more like adult playground type of things. So that's sort of the third issue I feel with adults watching um, kid cartoons. Okay. I also let's. So what are some solutions to this? Okay. I feel like one solution is more wholesome content. Okay. Why are we so attracted to these kid shows, these kiddish shows, and these um, adult kid shows? Okay. I believe that they're generally more, or let's say a lot more wholesome. Okay, we want to just have a pleasant experience. Some of this is escapism, which is sometimes healthy, right? That can become healthy, but I think a healthy dose of escapism is sometimes what you need in this world, right? But we can just make more wholesome adult shows, okay? For some reason, the current sort of narrative framework formula, for some reason, the equation is just adult equals gore, adult equals sex, adult equals toxic drama, adult equals cursing. It's like not necessarily, right? It's like that Disney Star to adult pop pipeline. They just totally transform because apparently that means adult. No, that doesn't mean adult. Shows can have and violence, right? Gory violence type of thing. That apparently means adult. We are kind of sort of being repulsed by those shows, which is why we're just heading to the things that don't have that, which happen to be these other shows. Okay, but the solution is just to start making more wholesome adult content. They kind of have that, but they sometimes it's almost like too wholesome, right? It doesn't have to be. It can be typical storylines, typical drama, just without all of this. Like it doesn't have to be the squeaky clean, almost Sesame Street vibe. Just less violence, less gore, less cursing. Okay, that's one solution. Because even when there is more adult geared animation, but then they just also fall into that formula and equations as well. Right. Like a lot of anime is more adult catered, kind of. Still some kiddie vibes in some of them, but then it just flips to like gore and violence and sex and that type of thing. So more wholesome adult shows. Okay. Another thing is more, what should we call it? Like, I don't know, for some reason, these kids shows have more depth, guess you could say. A lot of these adult shows are kind of shallow. For some reason, a lot of these kid shows, there's more characters. Let's just start there. There's more, they're more character driven, right? They're more There's more character development. There's more deeper world building, right? It's more intricate. Okay, let's just start making adult shows like that. Okay? For whatever reason, like that happens more with these kiddish shows, adult kid shows, that type of thing. It's just more in that department. It's better than a lot of these other shows because it seems like they're more over relying on more like playing to our sort of primitive primal emotions with sex, violence, gore, murder, cursing, melodrama, right? Adult shows seem to lean towards melodrama, while these kid cartoons are more just drama, if you will. It's deeper, it's better, it's more intricate and deeper world building, characterization, that type of thing, but we can just do that with adult shows. Okay? And I guess kind of connected to that is like, why is this? But healthier, sort of romantic, intimate storylines in kid shows. Okay? And compared to this sort of recycled drama, unrequited love, you cheated on me, blah, 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 drama, 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 drama. Right? There's healthier intimacy and romance in a lot of these kid shows. Okay? These kiddish shows, these adult kid shows. Why don't we just do that with some of these adult shows? Okay, so that's a basic sort of thing. Let's take all of these elements that we like in these kid shows and put them into these adult shows. Okay? And then just some things that's sort of related to this and that's sort of adjacent to it is I also see this sort of issue with there's been this increase in shows that star children but that are almost low key catered to adults. Okay? I really started noticing like with it seemed like it's been happening, but it seemed like it picked up after this It movie, right? With shows like Stranger Things and that type of thing, where it's very adult, very mature content that's typical like adult formula, but then it's just starring children. Okay, it just seems like it's that thing where we kind of repealed child labor, but somehow we just gave an exemption for acting. It's still labor. Sometimes it just seems very labor extensive. Okay, but then there's this thing of like, a, you know, kids involved in these shows with very intense, mature or adult sort of activity. Okay, it's kind of like, I know something else is going on there as well. I feel like there should be a reduction in those type of shows. There should even be a reduction in like child actors and acting. Like maybe not totally, but you know, in a more limited scope because we have all of this sort of technology and animation where we don't really need it at that level. Okay, so yeah, that's my sort of take on that.